Okay, Chadwick, your slow start to this season.
The Montreal Canadiens, and I've been waiting to talk about this team for the longest time. Personally, it's not shocking to me that they finished or that they've played 13 games and they've only won 3 of them so far this year, because they finished 18th in the regular season last year. They didn't get better. They lost their number 1 defenseman and their starting goalie. So you can't say that they got better after those notable subtractions. So I already mentioned their record. They're dead last in the Atlantic Division right now. They have the 3rd worst goal differential in the NHL, behind 2 of the absolute worst teams in the league right now, Arizona and Chicago. Those are the only teams that have a worse goal differential than Montreal. I will say, though, a bit of a caveat. They have the 2nd lowest shooting percentage in the NHL right now, a team shooting percentage. So you have to expect that will go up. So, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom in Montreal. I think they will improve, but it's been a terrible start so far. I just have a few more stats that I want to get through, and then I'll get your guys' opinion. They only have one line that has controlled the majority of expected goals this season, and it's not even their top line. It's Drouin, Dvorak, and Anderson, and they've controlled 52.1% of the expected goals, so barely over half. And that's been their best line this season, according to expected goals. Of course, you can make the argument that Suzuki has more points than anybody else on that line, but just in terms of framing it that way, that's been their best line, and they only have one of them that's been in the positive of expected goals, which is not good. Jake Allen is their starting goalie, of course, and then Sam Montembeault has been back there as their backup. Montembeault has not been good when he's played. Jake Allen has been slightly below average, like fine, but if you think about this team, like the only way that they get wins typically, I mean, especially in the playoffs, is stellar goaltending from Carey Price. And they haven't had that. They've had pretty much average goaltending all year, or below average. So it hasn't been good. A few players that haven't been, great this year. Cole Caulfield, as we know, talked about last episode, 1 point through 10 games, got sent down to the AHL. That's tough for anybody who drafted him in fantasy or traded for him, like Adam did, my other league. So that sucks for him.
Casey did in our league.
That's right. Jeff Petrie, though. Case, here we go. Jeff Petrie, this is another one for fantasy that is just brutal. Last year in fantasy, Petrie, in the way our league is structured, would have finished 44th among all players in total points. And I was very high on Petrie at the start of the year because he pretty much does everything. He hits, he scores, he puts up a ton of assists, power play points, etc. And especially because Weber isn't there, you'd think that Petrie would be having an even better year because of more opportunity to play. Well, he has just 2 assists in 13 games. He hasn't been great at all. And it's really impacting my fantasy team. I got him in the 7th round in both of my leagues, and I'm still waiting for him to do well. In terms of playoff odds, that's something that we talked about, and something I could have predicted or did predict at the start of the season, that the Montreal Canadiens would not make the playoffs. Money Puck has them at 24%, which I think is pretty generous given the competitiveness of the Atlantic Division. The Athletic, though, might be a bit harsh. They have them at 1% projected to make the playoffs, and they project them to finish 5th last in the NHL. So, final point before I pass it to you guys. I was looking at, Dom Ducharme, because this was the narrative last year, right? They fired their coach, and Dom Ducharme was the new guy in town, and he stuck around, and so he's the guy going forward. His record with the Habs is 18-26-7 in the regular season. So my question then to you guys, given all of this, is it time to fire Ducharme? Should the Habs fans overreact right now and call for his head? What's going on with the Habs? Will they get better? Case, we'll just go to you.
What's his record in the playoffs? Okay, thank you. We'll stick with Ducharme for a little longer. He's just got to have better players. I can't really blame it on him very much. You've talked about it a lot, Chad, that there's not a lot of goal scorers on this team. Well, I'll tell you, you're not going to win many games with Carey Price out and scoring 2 goals a game. That's their average. There's a lot of problems there, and they really need some guys to start clicking. And like you said, Caulfield is the main contributor to that. We really need him to come back and score some goals for this team badly. So I really don't have much else to say. Like, after all these great stats you brought up, this team has looked like absolute hot garbage, and it's another tip to the cap at the randomness of the NHL and everything that happens in this league, because this team went to the Stanley Cup Finals last year, and now they're going to be, in the bottom 5 at this rate.
I would say that I didn't gather all these stats and pick this slow start to talk about, because I didn't want to roast the Habs or whatever, but I definitely did. And I wanted to bury them because I'm sick of hearing it. So, for example, Adam, we were texting the other day, and he sends me shit about the Leafs all the time. Like, fair enough, they beat them in the playoffs. Like, that was so stupid. I can't believe it happened. But Adam sends me shit all the time, and he talks about how the Habs should be better. They should be a better team. They should be scoring more goals. And I just think, this roster is constructed so poorly in my mind. Having to rely on elite goaltending is not, a recipe for success. So I wanted to bring all of these out, just if Adam is listening, just to say, I don't think this team should be much better than they are. I think they should be a bit better. But this is not a playoff team by any stretch of the imagination, at least in my mind and in various models that we've seen. I mentioned too, Money Puck and The Athletic.
I think at this point for the Habs, the best thing for them would be to get a high draft pick in this coming draft, maybe even the number 1 pick in Shane Wright, because you've never really seen a clear direction with this team the last few years. And that run was miraculous last year, but it took a lot out of guys. Shea Weber likely is done for the rest of his career. Carey Price is just getting back. He will just be getting back out of the player assistance program, which is fantastic. That should give them a nice boost. But it just, when they lost to No, that's a big loss for them. Perry was great and everything, but yeah, again, just back to my point, they haven't really had a direction. We're going to go all in this year. Okay, we're going to take we're going to sort of hang on, see what happens this year. There's been no sort of clear, direct plan. And so, I don't know, maybe at this point you do sell off some veterans and sort of focus on a younger group and maybe try and build things back up. So I don't know. That's just what I think. What do you guys think?
I kind of think, with what you're talking about, Harp, what that sounds like to me is they're like the Minnesota of the East. They've always been this tweener team that they keep trying to make a push to do a playoff thing when really they should maybe take a step back. You think about their last 2 years, in a regular season, they wouldn't have made the playoffs last year and they went to the Stanley Cup. The year before that, they won the play-in series and made the playoffs. It's both of those seasons, it's not really a playoff season, although they made it. So maybe it's time to take the step back and get some drafting going, get some development of some of these players and trade off some of the veterans. But I bet you if you talk to any Montreal fan out there, they're going to say absolutely not.
Exactly.
That's just how they demand, what they demand of this team.
Dude, exactly. And no Habs fan is going to sit through a rebuild. I'm sorry. They just won't have it because this team has pieces and they expect to be in the playoffs. But you mentioned, I started out by mentioning this last year. They finished 18th in the NHL, but by some, craziness of the standings, they ended up going to the Stanley Cup Finals. So that's crazy. And then the year before that, in the play-in round, they were in 24th spot. They were the worst team to compete in the playoffs ever because they finished in the 24th spot there in terms of winning percentage. So it's just this team hasn't been good, and I don't see this team getting any better, especially in such a tough Atlantic division where, Ottawa is getting better. Detroit, as we've seen, has gotten better and looks really good, frankly. They're not a playoff team yet, but I think they could be next year. Seriously, I think they're that good. Oh, yeah. And so I just look at this team and think, yes, they probably need to sell some people and sell them off at the deadline and get some get some assets in return, but they won't. They don't want to do that, and Bergevin doesn't want to do that because then it's his job on the line, and they probably go with someone else to walk them through a rebuild. So all that being said, I don't see the Habs being this bad as the season goes on. I do think they will get a little better, but man, I don't see them being a playoff team at all. Oh, and I will say too, don't pick third overall if you're the Habs. Just don't pick third overall. Pick second, pick fourth, pick 10th. Don't pick third because it won't work out.